Tradition since 1897.
Brass monkey, that monkey.
Oh, yeah. This is the B-side of I'm a Believer, right? Isn't it? I'm pretty sure.
The Beastie Monkeys?
Yeah, this is, we're
Beastie
paying
Monkeys?
tribute to Peter Tork, Lake Monkey.
Adam Rausch, Yauch, and Peter Tork.
I love this. Our young staff, and included in that is you, Carol Roth, who never heard of me. I mean, I asked for a tribute to the Monkees, and I'm all hearing is this Cardi B or something, whatever this is.
Beastie Boys.
Tupac.
Beastie Boys.
You notice how Tupac has been mentioned by two people recently? I think
Jussie Smollett.
Well, Jussie Smollett said he was Tupac.
He was the gay Tupac.
Gay Tupac. And Kamala Harris said that she used to get high in college and listen to Tupac, but that's an anachronism because she graduated college like 7 years before Tupac's first album. So she lied. Both of them lied about Tupac.
And then she threw a bunch of people in jail for doing that too.
It was a Tupac this week. Let's go right now to our good friend. I haven't talked to him in a while, but we used to have him on the radio back at the other station. Scott Martin, good morning to you.
Scotty.
How are you kids doing? Bruce, they've kept us apart for too long. You're right.
Really.
About that.
Scott, of course, is the Chief Investment Officer of Kingsview Asset Management, contributor to Fox News, and to the Futures Institute of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. It's tough to get that all on his baseball cap, but somehow he manages to do that. Scott, thanks for being on the show today. We appreciate it.
Good to hear you guys. How's everything going?
It's okay.
We're doing okay.
It's okay. So
we got a new mayor coming soon. So hey, there you go.
Who would be the most business-friendly mayor of the 465
this
candidates?
This is, by the way, the hardest question of all time. This is like the Sophie's Choice of questions.
None of them
here.
are good. Oh, what did I just say?
None of them are good.
Yeah. I just saw a Sophie's Choice joke the other day. Go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry.
One of the three of us may be better, but Bill Daley probably promises to be at least the more business-savvy person. But I will tell you guys that so far, it's funny on that whole business sense or some of these questions that the candidates are receiving is, if you notice, a lot of them are really trying to toe that line between, well, we want to raise taxes, but only on certain areas, but we want to cut them here and raise them there, and we want to make this more friendly now. And then they forget the details. They don't even mention details. They just have these ideas that basically come without substance, as they would in a big field like this, I guess.
Carol, who did I tell you of the 14 candidates I thought would be best for the city of Chicago?
You said Bill, and I
said Bill Daley.
I believe the Cranes endorsed him as well.
I said Bill Daley, and I hate the Daleys because he cheated on his insurance exam. Oh, no, I didn't cheat. I left the spaces blank, and then somebody else came in and filled out the answers for me. I hate the Daleys.
It's certainly not the change that everybody's looking for, but obviously it does. This whole discussion plays into the issue that there is this rallying cry, whether it's here in Chicago or on a national level, that for some reason the wealthy aren't paying their quote-unquote fair share, and that the American dream is now a bad thing, and instead that we should have a communist dream. Scott, what's going on? Why is there sort of this resurgence towards socialism and communism and all of these things that are so fundamentally un-American?
Well, I think, Carol, we've talked about this a lot on Fox together, is I think that the Republicans, and I think, as we've seen over the last couple of years, depending on how you look at it, but certainly in the 2016 election, took on the rhetoric of, hey, we want to help business. We want to make things more appropriate to start new businesses in this country, because we had 8 years of the "you didn't build that" comments to business around the globe, and especially around America, that I think the Republicans took on that idea very well, and so that obviously worked in 2016. So I think what happened, Carol, is the Democrats said, well, we've got to go back to something different. We've got to go back almost to the drawing board and really, really hammer this idea of socialism is going to help you, capitalism is going to destroy you. Really ramp up.
But we have full employment. We have people coming back in the labor force.
No,
how are they even making that argument?
Everybody's got to have 3 jobs in order to have full employment. That's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told me.
Who now has a lovely new address, by the way, in a very nice luxury building.
Of course, of course.
Everybody should have access to, but she doesn't want to let anybody into.
Is it near one of Bernie's 3 houses? Is what I want to know.
near one of Bernie's three houses, maybe near some of the businesses that would have been started from the Amazon deal that she blew. Who knows? But I think, too, guys, looking at just that whole kind of idea that they're trying to tell really the youth, I mean, who's obviously, the millennials, a very big voting bloc, that they're really trying to poison their minds and tell them that capitalism is going to destroy them and leave them behind, when in reality, as you said, Carol, and as you know, Bruce, capitalism is what lifts people up. That capitalism is what brings people out of poverty and shrinks the wealth gap. And yeah, sure, elites do well in capitalist societies, but so do the poor if they're given a chance. So this idea that AOC and her cohorts are propagating really, to me, has as much credibility as, say, a Jussie Smollett bedtime story. And it doesn't seem like, because he clearly doesn't sleep, right? He walks around the city in the middle of the night.
With a Subway sandwich.
Exactly, with a Subway sandwich. I think it was tuna on toast or tuna on a toast.
Can I ask you a question now that you brought up Jussie Smollett? They say that a good prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich, but I don't see that the tuna sandwich was indicted yesterday, or the manager was just Jussie Smollett. Go ahead, Scott.
The manager should have been the key witness to this whole thing, because I'm sure Smollett was probably trying to plot with him in case the brothers didn't show up. You needed a backup plan, Bruce. You always need a good alibi or something. And I'll tell you, too, guys, the one thing that's interesting, I think, about, now that we're getting through, some of the announcements of seeing who's going to run, we had Elizabeth Warren declare, Kamala Harris is talking about maybe being a running mate. I mean, you're really going to see a lot of this poisoning, again, of the young minds in this country really start to ramp up here, because it's the only shot they have. I mean, Carol, you and I know this from the comments and the stories that we've had on Fox together, is that there's no other way for the Democrats to have any chance in 2020 unless they can really push this social agenda, because they've gone so far to the left that now you have to basically take this idea and completely set it on fire, because the Republicans have already won the capitalist argument. So if you can convince people to believe that socialism is the saving grace here, that's what you have to do to get the vote.
But Scott, we've given up on responsibility too. I was at the 2012 convention, Republican convention. It was a great experience, and they had an auxiliary scoreboard, that showed the national debt going up. And I think back in those days it was only about 12 or 13 trillion. And we gave up on that, and for good reason, because we wanted to win, because everybody wants a free lunch, including us, and that's the only way we were able to flip 9 million Obama voters to Donald Trump. So it's like we've given up on it too, haven't we?
Yeah. And to be fair, Bruce, the Republicans spend just as drunkenly as the Democrats do. But the one argument is that, in which environment are you going to see more tax revenue? The last couple of years, we've had record tax revenues at the U.S. Treasury Department, likely thankfully to a few of us and some of the listeners out there, too. But the reality is taxes are being paid, and they're being paid at a nice rate. And so at some point, the government does have to be responsible. But I guarantee you that if you look at things like, all these entitlement reforms that the Democrats want to do, if you look at this Green New Deal that's tens and tens of trillions of dollars just to even implement, let alone the cost it's going to have on our economy. The economic environment going forward under one of the two regimes, or maybe a mix of both, is a scary thought when you look at how the Democrats and maybe some of even the slowly left of center folks want to have things happen in this country, because it's completely going to push that national debt. I mean, you think 22 trillion is a bad number. I mean, looking at it like a jackpot in Vegas. I mean, multiply that thing times 2 or 3, and that's going to be your number.
Yeah, I mean, Scott, obviously, if we're going to trade on capitalism and the economy on the right, that obviously that has to go well. We know we're nearing the end of a business cycle. What's your take on timing? When do you think a recession is likely to hit, and do you think that ends up being a factor in 2020?
Yeah, Carol, we look at economic data very, very exclusively just in my business, because, we invest money for folks is how we kind of see the economy going. And I'll tell you, we don't see anything terrible on the horizon. We do see a volatile market environment just because of the fact that we have, some trade wars with China kind of going on, this small little, trade tiff thing that's been happening for over a year now almost, which is unbelievable. And then we've got these issues with D.C. and the fighting there, border walls and whatnot. So I think it's going to be a volatile year from the standpoint of the actual stock market, but I think the economy is going to continue to chug along because the business environment is very good. And so with the corporate tax cut that we got last year that was obviously poo-pooed as a technical term by a lot of folks in Congress. The reality is that did jumpstart some good economic growth, and it did have a nice effect, I think, on the business sentiment climate. We think that in 2020, depending on how some of the polls are showing, depending on how some of the politics are looking, world economy is very slow. That's probably your year when you're at least going to see a decent pullback in the stock market. But I think this year, although volatile, is probably going to be a positive year just because there's still that good sentiment coming off of the tax cuts. And frankly, it's not close enough to the election yet where we do have to worry about this regime change
Oy
just yet.
vey, 2020. That's when we don't need this.
Scott, the
Bruce.
important question, though, is, I didn't understand all that business stuff, is that Carol really is enamored of those brothers because they each had a 12-pack. So I have a 0-pack. How many are you packing right now, Scott?
I'm packing a negative, Bruce. And I
Sure.
thought it was funny about the brothers.
Yeah.
How about this picture, guys? You know the picture of those two guys standing in the gym, which is great. You know, they look awesome. But the reality is there's other people in the gym working out while those guys are taking their shirts off and taking pictures. And what are they doing? Getting on the equipment, sweating all over it, not wiping it down. I mean,
What's the problem, Scott? I'm all in for this.
And what,
This sounds like
and what are you going to do? Rat tail the brothers there with their 12-packs?
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, no
Their
way.
neck broken.
Hey, Scott Martin, Chief
Or
Investment
attacked in the middle of the
Officer
night. It depends.
of Kingsview Asset Management, contributor to Fox News and to the Futures Institute, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Thanks so much for joining us, Scott. We appreciate it.